In the world of finance, there are few stories as captivating and dramatic as the one about George Soros and his legendary bet against the Bank of England. It's a story of a man with a brilliant mind for currency trading, who made a decision that would change the course of his own fortune, the fate of a country, and the global financial landscape forever. The year was 1992, and Soros was about to embark on a daring move to short the British pound, a move that would nearly bankrupt the Bank of England and earn him a staggering profit of over $1 billion. This tale of high-stakes risk-taking, strategic maneuvering, and ultimate victory will leave you on the edge of your seat and inspire you to think about the power of the individual in the world of finance. So buckle up and get ready to discover the story of how George Soros nearly bankrupted the Bank of England trading currencies.
He is an investing legend, a historic figure in the fields of business, politics, and philanthropy. George Soros.
George Soros is a legend in the world of investment management. When he moves money, the markets react. When he speaks, the world listens.
Very interesting guy, and different from a Warren Buffett or any of the other great investors.
Following the Second World War, European nations decided that the only way to prevent the same level of devastation from occurring again was to band together and form a tightly integrated union. The idea was that if the European economies were all interdependent, they would be less likely to start another war. The euro is, of course, the ultimate manifestation of this integration. However, prior to the introduction of the single currency in 1999, Europe used a different system to manage its currencies. Back in 1979, the European community countries were not yet ready to give up their national currencies, but they did agree to link them all together at a fixed rate, effectively eliminating the exchange rate fluctuations that are normally considered when doing business across borders. This new system, known as the Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM, sounded good on paper and helped a lot of people. However, it made these countries' national banks extremely vulnerable. People buy currencies in large quantities every day to fund imports and exports, and these transactions have a significant impact on the actual exchange rate available from the market. As a result, once a country joins the ERM, it must constantly monitor the markets and intervene if their exchange rates begin to deviate too much. If there were too many buyers, the national bank would start selling, and if everyone was selling, it would go in to buy. Without going into too much detail, the ERM was flawed because each country is different and must constantly balance interest rates, inflation, and economic growth, which it cannot do if its currency is artificially chained to others.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it evident from the Prime Minister's reply that she just gave that she has absolutely no serious intention of joining the exchange rate mechanism for as long as she survives?
No, Mr. Speaker, not in the least. I stand by the statement we made at Madrid. I was not able to join the exchange rate mechanism during my first decade. I hope to do so during my second.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't she agree with the view expressed by her former Chancellor last night, that Britain's non-membership of the exchange rate mechanism is an exposed flank? And as a result, isn't that clear that last night that she was savaged by a live scapegoat?
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure my right honourable friend will be the first. I'm sure my right honourable friend, the former Chancellor, will be the first to agree on the need to get inflation down, and that is top priority.
Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, understood this very well, which is why she opposed it, and Britain did not join the ERM when it first started. However, as the British economy deteriorated towards the end of the 1980s, Thatcher's Eurosceptics lost ground to more pro-European Conservative Party members. By October 1990, Thatcher's power diminished to the point where Britain joined the ERM despite her opposition, thanks to the political clout of John Major, the Chancellor at the time. Thatcher resigned less than a month later, and Major was appointed Prime Minister, hailing the ERM as his victory. However, while November 1990 may have marked the beginning of John Major's successful political career, it was only the beginning of Britain's economic problems, because the UK was already in a recession when it joined the ERM. When an economy is in a recession, The central bank, in this case, the Bank of England, wants to lower interest rates to help it recover. However, due to the ERM, it was no longer able to do so. The British pound was already a very weak currency, with inflation 3 times higher in the UK than in Germany. If the Bank of England cut interest rates, it would benefit the British economy, but it would devalue the pound so much that Britain would have to exit the ERM, which John Major would never allow.
Our top priority is to get inflation down. And I would also hope that he would be aware that the way of doing that in the longer term has to be by making the price of money more expensive. If he doesn't know that, I'm very surprised.
The British economy suffered from 1990 to 1992. Of course, simply keeping interest rates high wasn't enough to keep the pound's value stable. So, over the course of 2 years, the Bank of England would frequently go to the market and begin purchasing pounds by the millions, depleting its foreign exchange reserves in the process. Even so, it didn't really help because the pound was constantly weakening during this period, barely staying within the ERM's limits. Almost every currency speculator predicted that the British pound would have to fall in value at some point. But the million-dollar question was when that would occur. George Soros was the man who had the answer. He'd been running his hedge fund since the 1970s, and his specialty was predicting and, on occasion, forcing the catalysts for major market events. He was well aware that almost everyone was ready to bet against the British pound if there was some sort of bad news that could spark a stampede large enough to overwhelm the Bank of England. Soros and his fund began building a position against the pound in August 1992, and this is how he did it. He'd go to a big bank or another hedge fund and borrow pounds with the promise of repaying them plus interest. Then he'd go to the foreign exchange market and sell those pounds to buy German marks instead, with the idea that if the exchange rate fell, he'd be able to buy those pounds back cheaper, profiting from the difference. By the end of August, Soros had gradually built up a position worth $1.5 billion against the pound. However, the exchange rate had barely changed.
When George invested, he would invest his whole fund often. I mean, he did not take small bets. And again, contrary to almost anyone else who tells you how you're supposed to invest, he didn't follow any of the rules of...
He needed some sort of news to start advancing his position. Fortunately for him, on September 16th, the president of the Bundesbank gave a seemingly innocuous interview that Soros could use. The Bundesbank president said that he doesn't rule out that some currencies might come under pressure, which in and of itself is a very vague and unconvincing statement, but Soros decided that it was good enough for him. That same night, while Europe was sleeping, Soros called any international bank, company, or individual with British pounds and attempted to borrow them with great success. Soros had sold the equivalent of $10 billion in pounds on the open market by the time the British awoke. The Bank of England, unsurprisingly, was in complete disarray. Following an emergency meeting with John Major, the Chancellor of the Exchequer launched a desperate battle. On September 17th, at 8:40 a.m., he authorized the purchase of £1 billion from the market, which had no effect. By 9:00 a.m., he had purchased another £2 billion, at which point he dialed John Major again to request permission to raise interest rates, which, of course, would be disastrous to the economy because Britain was in a recession. John Major initially refused because he believed it would be political suicide. However, as Soros and the global currency market continued to sell pounds, by 11:00 a.m., Major had conceded, and Britain had made a surprise announcement that it was raising its interest rate by 2%, a significant increase. By the end of the day, Britain had purchased £27 billion and raised its interest rate to 15% for the second time. However, Soros alone had sold roughly half as many pounds, and by then, the entire world had followed suit.
It indicated to us that we are in at the end game, that there was no, this was an act of desperation. So instead of restraining us, it was really an invitation to double up, to try to sell as much more as possible.
At 7:30 p.m., The British government conceded defeat with the following news conference, capping off a historic day in London's financial markets with the Chancellor announcing that the pound had been suspended from the ERM and that the second of two dramatic interest rate rises that day had been cancelled. As the foreign exchange markets were left to their own devices over the next few days, the British pound fell 15% against the German mark and 25% against the US dollar. Soros and his fund profited handsomely from their transaction, while the estimated cost to the British taxpayer was more than £3 billion. But here's the funny part. In the aftermath of Black Wednesday, the Bank of England was once opposed to free control of the British pound, which it did, and over the next few years, it steadily cut interest rates, restoring the British economy to high levels of growth. By 1997, the British pound was actually more valuable than it had been during the ERM, and the UK was on its way to 16 consecutive years of economic expansion, dubbed the Black Wednesday by some. So despite pocketing about $15 for every man, woman, and child in the United Kingdom, Soros may have actually done the British a favor.
Let us admit it frankly, as a business people should. We've had no end of a lesson. It will do us no end of good. It has been, in particular, a lesson for governments. The role of government in trade and commerce, as in much else, is to create a framework of stability within which enterprise can flourish. But the rigid stability of fixed exchange rates threatened to stifle enterprise and obstruct commerce. It required heavy burdens to be placed on companies, including efficient companies. It made imports artificially cheap and exports artificially expensive. It starved firms of capital. It was bad for business, and it meant that home owners watched anxiously as the cost of their investment rose inexorably. Yet the stability which fixed rates offered was a false one. It prevented currencies from adjusting gradually to market realities, and in the end, it produced wild swings of instability. There's nothing new about fixed exchange rates collapsing. What might be new is to finally learn the lesson that fixed rates don't and can't work in free markets.
Thank you for taking the time to watch my video on how George Soros nearly bankrupted the Bank of England through currency trading. I hope you found it both informative and engaging. If you enjoy this video and would like to see more like it, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I release new content related to finance, economics, and trading. Additionally, subscribing to my channel will give you access to a community of like-minded individuals who are passionate about learning more about the world of finance and trading. You'll be able to participate in discussions, share your own insights, and connect with others who share your interests. So, if you're interested in staying up to date on the latest news and trends in finance and trading, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.